The Vexary Dominion had ruled the stars for 300 years, and they had never once failed to conquer a world they wanted. Their empire stretched across 17 star systems and contained billions of souls who served under their iron rule. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the stars pass by as his invasion fleet moved through the darkness of space. He was old by Vexary standards, with scales that had turned from bright green to a dull gray, and eyes that had seen 100 worlds burn. Today he would add another civilization to his list of conquests. The humans were nothing special according to his intelligence reports. They had only been traveling between stars for about 200 years, which made them infants compared to the ancient Vexary. Their territory was small, consisting of maybe 20 colony worlds scattered around their home star. Their fleet was estimated at 300 ships, and most of those were converted cargo haulers and mining vessels that had been given weapons as an afterthought. Zorath made a sound that his species used to express amusement. This would not even be a proper war. It would be a harvest. His scout ships had detected a lone human vessel at the edge of the region humans claimed as their own. It was a small frigate called the Sentinel, and it was transmitting a message requesting communication. Zorath decided to humor them. He always enjoyed the moment when lesser species realized what was about to happen to them. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the UN Sentinel and watched a massive Vexary dreadnought emerge from fold space. She had been in the Navy for 25 years, and she had seen many ships, but nothing like this. The Vexary vessel was enormous, and it bristled with weapons that could destroy her ship 100 times over. Her own frigate was tiny in comparison, and she knew that if it came to a fight she would not survive. But that was not why she was here. She was here to deliver a message. Her communications officer looked at her with fear in his eyes. "Commander, they are hailing us." The Vexary message came through the translator as a simple demand. "Surrender your vessel and provide navigational data to your homeworlds, and resistance will result in extinction." Elena took a deep breath. She had been given very specific orders for this exact situation, and she had practiced what she would say many times. She opened a channel and spoke in a clear, steady voice. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Nations ship Sentinel, and you are approaching sovereign human space." She paused to let the translator work. "We have no quarrel with the Vexary Dominion, and we do not seek war, but we will not surrender our people or our worlds to anyone." On his bridge, Zorath listened with mild interest. This was the part he enjoyed, watching the small creatures try to sound brave. Elena continued speaking, and her voice remained calm and controlled. "I am authorized to tell you that humanity offers friendship to all who come in peace, and we would welcome diplomatic relations with your people." She paused again, and when she spoke next, her voice had changed. It was harder now, and there was something beneath it that the Vexary translator could not quite capture. "But I am also authorized to give you a warning, and I need you to listen very carefully." Zorath leaned forward slightly. This was unusual. Most species simply begged at this point. "We have studied your conquests and we know how you fight," Elena said. "You move from system to system, and you overwhelm your enemies with superior numbers and firepower, and then you enslave the survivors." She was correct, and Zorath saw no reason to deny it. "The species you have conquered were peaceful," Elena continued. "They built their civilizations in times of safety, and they never imagined that something like you would come out of the darkness to take everything from them." Her eyes seemed to look directly into the screen, as if she could see Zorath himself. "We are not like them." There was silence for a moment, and then Elena spoke her final words. "If you cross into our territory, you will not find what you expect, and you will not find easy prey or frightened civilians begging for mercy." Her voice dropped lower. "You will find what we have been preparing since before we knew you existed, and you will find the answer to a question humanity has been asking itself since we first looked up at the stars." She paused one final time. "What will we do when the monsters come?" The transmission ended, and Elena turned to her crew. "Get us out of here now." The Sentinel jumped to fold space just as the first Vexry weapons fired, and the ship shuddered as energy beams tore through her hull. But she made the jump, and she survived. On his bridge, Zorath watched the small human ship flee, and he made a sound of contempt. Another weak civilization making empty threats. Another set of worlds to harvest. His officers waited for his orders, and he gave them without hesitation. "Set course for the human territories, and we will take their colonies first, and then we will proceed to their homeworld." He settled back into his command chair and closed his eyes. "Wake me when there is something worth seeing." The invasion fleet of 400 warships carrying 2 million soldiers crossed into human space 3 days later. They expected to find panicked evacuations and desperate defensive formations. They expected to find terrified populations begging for mercy. They expected the same thing they had found in 17 other star systems over 300 years of conquest. They did not know that humanity had been waiting for them. They did not know that every human colony had been evacuated weeks ago, and that the populations had been moved to hidden locations that the Vexry would never find. They did not know that the Sol system had been transformed into a trap that had taken humanity 50 years to build. They did not know that Captain Elena Vasquez had already reported back to High Command, and that her warning had been recorded and analyzed. Most importantly, they did not know that her warning had been genuine. She had asked them to turn back. She had given them a chance to choose peace, and they had responded with weapons fire. That had been their choice. Now they would face the consequences, and those consequences would be something the galaxy would remember for a very long time. The first human colony world was called New Geneva, and it was supposed to be an easy target. The planet had a population of 12 million people living in 3 major cities and dozens of smaller settlements. According to Vexry intelligence, it was a farming world that produced food for other human colonies, and its defenses were minimal. Sub-Commander Keth led the invasion force that descended through the atmosphere, and he expected to see chaos below. He expected to see evacuation ships fleeing in all directions and ground vehicles clogging the roads, and panicked civilians running through the streets. Instead, he saw nothing. The cities were there exactly where the map said they would be, and the buildings stood intact, and the lights were still on in many windows, but there was no movement anywhere. Keth ordered his dropship to land in the central plaza of the capital city, and he stepped out onto the stone pavement with his weapon raised. The plaza was empty. The streets around it were empty. The entire city was empty. He sent his soldiers to search the buildings, and they reported the same thing everywhere. They went to homes contained furniture and clothing and personal belongings, but no people. Food sat in storage units still fresh and preserved. Computers were still running, and displays showed news reports from weeks ago. It was as if every single person had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of whatever they were doing. Where did they go? One of his officers asked, and her scales were rippling with unease. Keth did not have an answer. He reported back to High Commander Zorath, who was still aboard his flagship in orbit. "The planet is abandoned, Commander, and there are no signs of combat or forced evacuation." Zorath was silent for a long moment. "Search everywhere and find where they are hiding." They searched for 2 days, and they found nothing. No hidden bunkers, no underground shelters, no secret tunnels leading out of the cities. The humans had simply vanished. On the 3rd day, Keth entered the office of the planetary governor, hoping to find some clue about what had happened. The office was like everything else on New Geneva, and it was neat and organized and completely abandoned. But there was something on the desk. A single piece of paper sat in the exact center of the otherwise empty surface. Keth picked it up and read the words that had been printed on it. The translation was simple, and it contained only 3 words. "You were warned." A chill ran through Keth that had nothing to do with the temperature. He reported his finding to Zorath, who dismissed it as a pathetic attempt at psychological warfare. "They are trying to frighten us," the High Commander said. "And it will not work." He ordered the fleet to move on to the next colony world. The second planet was called Armstrong, and it had been a mining colony with 8 million inhabitants. It was also completely empty. The mines were still operational, and the machinery was still running, but there were no workers anywhere. The same message waited in the governor's office. "You were warned the third colony world was empty. The fourth was empty. The fifth and sixth and seventh were all empty. 12 human settlements in total, and not a single living person in any of them." The Visari soldiers began to grow nervous, and whispers spread through the ranks. Where had the humans gone? How had they evacuated so many people so quickly? Why had they left everything behind? And what did that message mean? Zorth refused to show any concern, but privately, he was beginning to feel something unfamiliar. It was not quite fear, but it was close. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. The species he had conquered had always reacted the same way. They panicked, and they fled, and they fought desperately, and they died. They did not simply disappear. They did not leave behind empty cities and ominous warnings. They did not act like they had planned for this. But the humans were different somehow. The humans had known the Vexari were coming. The humans had prepared. And now the humans were waiting somewhere for something that Zorath could not understand. He pushed these thoughts aside and focused on his objective, the human homeworld Earth. That was where they must have gone, and that was where he would find them, and that was where he would end this. He ordered the fleet to maximum speed, and they raced toward the Sol system. The journey took 17 days, and during that time, Zorath studied everything the Dominion knew about Earth. It was a small planet orbiting a yellow star, and it was the world where humanity had evolved, and it was the center of their civilization. If he could take Earth, then the war would be over. The humans would have no choice but to surrender. His fleet emerged from fold space at the edge of the Sol system, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. The star burned steadily. At the center of the system, several planets orbited in their ancient paths. An asteroid belt stretched between the inner and outer worlds. And then his sensors began to scream warnings. Zorath looked at the tactical display, and his scales went pale. The outer Sol system was not empty. It was filled with objects. Millions of objects. Billions of objects. Small ones no larger than a fist. Large ones the size of moons. All of them drifting in careful patterns throughout the asteroid belt and beyond. His tactical officer spoke in a voice that trembled slightly. "Commander, those objects appear to be weapons, and they appear to be mines." Zorath stared at the display. The humans had not run away to hide on Earth. The humans had not fled in terror. The humans had been building a trap, and his fleet had just flown directly into it. The first mine detonated against the hull of a Vexari destroyer, and the ship vanished in a ball of nuclear fire. The second mine hit before the fire had even faded, and then the third and the fourth. And then there were too many to count. The minefield was enormous, and it stretched across the entire outer Sol system in a web of death that the Vexari could not see until it was too late. The mines were not sophisticated by galactic standards, and they used simple fusion warheads and basic proximity triggers. But there were so many of them. Billions upon billions of them hidden among the asteroids and buried inside comets and disguised as space debris. Every time a Vexari ship tried to evade one mine, it triggered 3 more. Every time a weapons officer fired at an incoming threat, the energy signature attracted dozens of seeker mines that had been dormant and waiting. High Commander Zorath watched his tactical display turn red with destruction, and for the first time in his long life, he felt true fear. He had lost 60 ships in the first hour. 60 ships, destroyed by weapons that were crude and simple and should have been easy to avoid. But the humans had not relied on sophistication. They had relied on numbers. They had relied on patience. They had relied on decades of preparation. Zorath realized with growing horror that these mines had not been placed recently, and they had not been deployed in response to the Vexri invasion. They had been here for years, maybe decades, maybe longer. The humans had looked at the stars long before they ever met another species, and they had asked themselves a simple question: what will we do when something comes to kill us? And then they had started building their answer: the fleet. Regrouped in a relatively clear zone, and Zorath assessed the damage: 112 ships destroyed, thousands of soldiers dead, and they had not even reached the inner system yet. His officers looked at him with fear in their eyes, and some of them suggested retreat. Zorath silenced them with a look. He had never retreated in his life. He would not start now. The path ahead was partially clear now, and the destroyed mines had created gaps in the defensive web. Earth was visible in the distance, and it was a small blue dot against the black of space. The prize was within reach. He ordered the advance to continue. The fleet moved forward slowly this time, with sensors at maximum power searching for any sign of danger. They cleared the worst of the minefield and entered the inner system. For a few minutes, it seemed like the worst was over. Then the weapons platforms activated. There were thousands of them hidden among the debris of destroyed mines and the rocks of the asteroid belt. They had been cold and silent for years, and their reactors had been dormant, and their weapons had been powered down. Now they came to life. Railguns that could accelerate metal slugs to incredible speeds opened fire from every direction. Directed energy weapons burned through shields and armor. Missile batteries launched salvos so dense that they appeared as solid walls on Vexri sensors. Zorath shouted orders, and his ships tried to return fire, but the platforms were small and spread out. And there were too many of them. Worse still, the platforms seemed to be working together. They were not just attacking randomly. They were hurting the Vexri fleet, pushing them into certain channels, forcing them into specific areas of space. And in those areas, more mines waited kill zones. The humans had designed kill zones. They had spent decades creating a system that would force any invading fleet into predetermined paths where overlapping fields of fire would destroy them. Zorath understood finally what the human captain had meant. You will not find what you expect. You will find what we prepared. This was not a battle. This was an execution. His fleet was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they could barely see. Ships exploded left and right, and the tactical display showed nothing but death. A young officer approached him with a report. "Commander, we have lost 208 ships, and our remaining vessels are scattered, and we cannot maintain formation." Zorath did not respond. He was staring at the blue dot that was Earth. It was still there, still waiting, still out of reach. Another explosion rocked his flagship, and alarms began to sound. Hull breach on Deck 7. Weapons Array 3 offline shields failing. On the port side, his second-in-command spoke urgently. "Commander, we must retreat, and we cannot survive this." Zorath turned to look at him, and there was something broken in the old commander's eyes. "Where would we retreat to?" he asked quietly. "And they knew we were coming, and they prepared this, and do you think they would let us leave?" As if in answer to his question, a new group of contacts appeared on the sensors. Ships, human ships, 300 of them emerging from behind the moons and planets where they had been hiding. They were not the converted cargo haulers that Vexri intelligence had predicted. They were warships, purpose-built warships with heavy armor and powerful weapons. They had been constructed in secret shipyards, hidden throughout the system. Another part of the trap, another layer of the defense. They moved with perfect coordination, and their attacks were synchronized to the second. The Vexri fleet had walked into a trap that humanity had spent 50 years building, and now the trap was closing. The battle for Earth began in the space between Mars and the asteroid belt, and it was unlike anything the Vexri had ever experienced. The human warships did not fight like the other species the Dominion had conquered. Those species had fought desperately, and they had fought bravely. But they had fought without coordination. They had been civilians, trying to be soldiers. The humans were something else entirely. Their ships moved in perfect formation, and each vessel knew exactly where to be and when to be there. When one ship fired, the others adjusted their positions to maximize the damage. When one ship was damaged, the others moved to protect it. They fought like a single organism with 300 bodies, but it was the fighters that truly broke the Vexery spirit. Small craft, barely larger than escape pods, came swarming out of the human capital ships by the thousands. Each fighter carried a single pilot, and each pilot flew with a ferocity that the Vexery could not understand. They threw themselves into impossible situations without hesitation. They flew directly into weapons fire to protect their comrades. They rammed damaged Vexery ships when their own weapons ran dry. They died by the hundreds, and still they kept coming. The Vexery had pilots too, but Vexery pilots were valuable assets trained over many years and protected whenever possible. They did not sacrifice themselves. They did not embrace death. They did not fight like they had nothing to lose. A Vexery commander named Threll managed to disable a human fighter with a lucky shot, and he ordered it captured before being destroyed himself. The fighter was brought into a landing bay, and its pilot was pulled from the wreckage. She was young by human standards, and she was badly wounded with blood running down her face and one arm hanging useless at her side. But she was alive. High Commander Zorath ordered her brought to his bridge for interrogation. He needed to understand what he was facing. The human pilot stood before him, and she did not seem afraid. She should have been afraid. She was wounded and alone and surrounded by enemies, and her ship had been destroyed. But she looked at Zorath with steady eyes, and there was something in them that he could not identify. "Why?" Zorath demanded through the translator. "And why do you fight like this?" The human tilted her head slightly as if the question confused her. "Like what?" she asked. "You throw your lives away," Zorath said, "and you sacrifice yourselves without hesitation, and your pilots fly to certain death as if it means nothing." He leaned forward. "You could have surrendered, and you could have served the Dominion, and you could have lived, but instead you choose to die." The human was silent for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was calm. "You really do not understand us, do you?" Zorath did not respond, and he waited for her to continue. "You have conquered 17 star systems," the pilot said, "and you have defeated dozens of species, and you think you know how civilizations work." She coughed and blood appeared on her lips, but she kept talking. "The species you conquered were peaceful, and they evolved in safe environments, and they built their civilizations in times when there were no predators to fear." She looked directly into his eyes. "They never imagined that something like you could exist." Zorath felt something cold move through him. "But we are different," the pilot continued, "and we did not evolve in safety, and our world was not kind." She smiled then, and it was not a pleasant expression. "We come from a planet where everything wanted to kill us, and the weather wanted to kill us, and the animals wanted to kill us, and even the plants wanted to kill us." Her voice grew stronger despite her wounds. "We survived ice ages and plagues and famines, and we survived predators that hunted us in the darkness, and we survived because we learned to fight back." She laughed softly. "And then we discovered the most dangerous predator on our world." Zorath waited. "Ourselves," the pilot said. "And we spent our entire history at war with each other, and we killed each other by the millions over land and resources and religion and ideas." She straightened up despite the pain. "We have been fighting for our survival since we crawled out of the ocean, and we have been preparing for something like you since we lived in caves and looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there." She took a step toward Zorath, and the guards raised their weapons, but she ignored them. "You are not the first monster we have faced, and you are not the first enemy that wanted to destroy us, and you are not even the most dangerous threat we have ever survived." Her eyes never left his. "You are just the latest." Zorath felt the cold spread through his entire body. "We gave you a warning," the pilot said, "and we asked you to turn back, and we offered you peace." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "You should have listened." An explosion rocked the ship and alarms began to sound. The pilot smiled again. "That will be my friends, and they are coming for me." She was right. A human strike team had boarded the flagship while Zorath was. Distracted, they fought through his guards with terrible efficiency, and they reached the bridge in minutes. The last thing Zorath saw was a human soldier raising a weapon. The last thing he heard was the pilot speaking one final word, "Vasquez." Then, there was only darkness. The Battle of Earth lasted 7 days, and when it ended, the Vexry invasion fleet had been destroyed. Of the 400 warships that had crossed into human space, only 11 remained operational of the 2 million soldiers who had come to conquer. Humanity, fewer than 50,000 survived. High Commander Zorath was dead, and his flagship had been captured by a human boarding team. The other senior commanders had died with their ships as the trap closed around them. The survivors gathered their damaged vessels and sent a message of surrender on all frequencies. They expected execution. That was what they would have done if the situation had been reversed. They would have killed every prisoner and destroyed every ship and left nothing but ash and silence. Instead, the humans sent medical ships. Doctors and nurses boarded the Vexry vessels, and they treated the wounded regardless of species. They brought food and water and blankets. They spoke through translators and their voices were kind. The Vexry did not understand Subcommander Keth, who had searched the empty cities of New Geneva, was among the survivors. He was brought before Admiral Chun, the commander of the Human Defense Forces, and he expected to hear the terms of his execution. Admiral Chun was an older man with gray hair and tired eyes. He sat across from Keth in a small room aboard a human station, and he did not look like a conqueror. He looked like someone who had seen too much death. "The war is over," Chun said through the translator, "and you have a choice to make." Keth waited. "You can remain here as prisoners of war, and you will be treated according to our laws, which require us to provide you with food and shelter and medical care." Chun paused. "Or you can take your ships and return to Dominion space, and you can carry a message to your leaders." Keth was confused. "You would let us go?" he asked. Chen nodded slowly. "We do not want to rule you, and we do not want your territory, and we do not want conquest." He leaned back in his chair. "We never wanted this war, and we tried to warn you, and we asked you to turn back." Keth remembered the words on the paper in the governor's office. "You were warned. Your commander chose to ignore that warning," Chung continued. "And now 2 million of your people are dead, and your fleet is destroyed, and your empire has learned what happens when you threaten humanity." His voice was not angry. It was sad. "I wish it had not come to this, and I wish your commander had listened, and I wish we could have been friends instead of enemies." He stood up. "But we will not apologize for defending our home." The 11 Veshri ships chose to carry the message home. Before they left, Chun gave them a recording to deliver to the Dominion leadership. Keth watched the recording many times during the long journey back in it. Admiral Chun stood on the bridge of his flagship with the blue sphere of Earth visible through the window behind him. His voice was calm and measured. "To the leaders of the Veshri Dominion, and I am Admiral Chun of the United Nations Defense Force." He paused. "Your invasion fleet has been destroyed, and your soldiers are dead or captured, and your commander Zorath is among the fallen." There was no triumph in his voice, no celebration, only exhaustion. "We warned you, and we asked you to turn back, and we gave you every opportunity to choose peace." His eyes seemed to look through the screen, directly at whoever was watching. "You chose war." He let the words hang in the air. "You have now seen how that choice ended for you." He stepped closer to the camera. "We do not want your territory, and we do not want revenge, and we do not want to become what you are." His voice hardened slightly. "But understand this, and understand it well." He paused again. We have been fighting for our survival since the first human picked up a rock and decided not to die, and we have faced extinction more times than you can imagine. And we are still here." The blue planet turned slowly behind him. "If you want peace, then come and talk, and we have built a diplomatic station in neutral space, and we will meet you there, and we will discuss how our peoples can coexist." His expression did not change. "If you want war, then come and fight, and you know where to find us, and you know what we are capable of, and you know what waits for you in this system." He took a breath. "And now you know that when humanity gives a warning, you should listen." The recording ended. Keth delivered the message to the Dominion Council, and he told them everything he had seen. The empty colonies, the minefield, the weapons platforms, the human fighters who flew to their deaths without hesitation, the pilot who smiled while bleeding and spoke of monsters. The council listened in silence, and when Keth finished speaking, they did not give orders for a second invasion. They did not call for revenge. They asked for the coordinates of the diplomatic station. 3 months later, the first Vexery ambassador arrived at the station, and she was met by a human diplomat who extended his hand in greeting. The human smiled, and his voice was warm. "Welcome, and we have been hoping you would come." And in that moment, the Vexery understood something that would spread throughout the galaxy in the years to come. The humans were not monsters. They did not enjoy killing. They did not want war. They would always offer friendship first. They would always extend a hand before they raised a fist. But if you ignored their warnings, if you threatened their home, if you mistook their kindness for weakness, then you would learn what 10,000 years of survival had taught them, and that lesson would be fatal. The Vexery chose peace, and the galaxy watched and learned. And humanity continued reaching for the stars, knowing that somewhere out there other species were telling stories about the small creatures from the deadly world, the creatures who warned before they struck, the creatures who offered peace but prepared for war, the creatures who had fought their way out of the darkness and would never go back, the humans, the wolves among the stars.